Understanding Plagiarism and the Art of Referencing. Hello, my name is Greg Sheaf. I'm one of the subject librarians at Trinity, and today we'll be looking at a brief introduction to academic integrity, how to avoid being accused of committing plagiarism, and how to get to grips with referencing and citation and using software to make your life easier in that respect. So we'll be looking at a definition of plagiarism, the consequences of that, and specifically in Trinity College Dublin, how that's detected both by your lecturer and by software called Turnitin, before moving on to the art of referencing, the citation and referencing, and how to keep accurate records using reference management software to make your life easier when you're writing your essay or thesis. Okay, so what is plagiarism? I think it's fairly obvious when we talk about using someone else's exact words or their images or music or whatever and passing that off as your own. It's seen as being academic theft. What is slightly more complicated is the concept of using someone else's ideas and passing them off as your own, but that is equally viewed as plagiarism. Now let's take a look at this video from my colleagues at Bainbridge State College, which really is a masterclass on how to avoid plagiarism. In just a couple of minutes, it really does cut to the chase. So here's another excellent resource, this time from our colleague at the University of Connecticut. This is available from the library website, so download it and read it in your own time. But again, it really does get to the nub of what it means to avoid plagiarism. Now, although we are mainly interested in the concept of plagiarism in an academic context, it's not just in academia. You may remember from a few years ago that the speech which Melania Trump gave seemed exceptionally similar to the one which was given by her predecessor as the First Lady, Michelle Obama. And you can see some of the lines from these speeches demonstrated here. It really is startling, and Melania really should have fired her speechwriter after this came to light. Now, that's all well and good, but what about in Trinity? Well, if you are detected as having committed plagiarism, that really can be quite severely viewed. And it's important to realize it's the act of plagiarism that's punished, whether or not you meant to commit it. Okay, now that is important because it's likely that if you are a postgraduate student, you will get no leeway whatsoever when it comes to plagiarism. That might be slightly different if you are a very, very fresh-faced fresher who's just started the college. You may not be expected to know quite what plagiarism is at that stage. But it really is the act rather than the intent. It is also true that you guys will have to complete what's called the Ready Steady Write plagiarism tutorial, which is available from the library's Avoiding Plagiarism website. And probably before submitting each piece of coursework or thesis or whatever, you will have to sign something saying that you understand what plagiarism is and you've completed this tutorial. So this tutorial, where is it? To get to the Avoiding Plagiarism website from the library homepage, so just Google TCD Library, there on the right-hand side, it says Avoiding Plagiarism. So you click on that, and these are all the resources we have that we've put together on how best to avoid plagiarism as part of academic integrity. So that Ready Steady Write anti-plagiarism tutorial is right there. The link is on the left-hand side, and then you'll see the direct link when you go to that page. We also mentioned a cover sheet which needs to be submitted with each piece of work, and this is what the cover sheet is stating. It's saying that you have actually done this tutorial. So even if you haven't done it, you will be taken as having completed that tutorial and knowing what plagiarism is. So how is plagiarism detected? Well, a lot of this is actually done by your tutors or your lecturers or your examiners being very, very familiar with the key sources. So if you rip off somebody's ideas or terminology, they will know that because they will know what the ideas and sources are in any particular subject. Now, perhaps of more importance is that everything is now pretty much put through this piece of software called Turnitin. So anything which is uploaded through Blackboard, for instance, is probably going through this software called Turnitin, which checks your submission against hundreds of thousands of other submissions, including anything else that you've actually submitted yourself. So this then produces what's called a similarity score, and it is saying how similar your work is when compared to other pieces of work. Now, Your lecturers then have to interpret this similarity score, because just because something has a high similarity score doesn't mean it's necessarily all been plagiarized. You could have lots of quotations, for instance, in your work. And so it is up to your lecturers to interpret this score. Now, if you want help on using Turnitin, then you should go to the Turnitin help pages on our Trinity Academic Practices website. The link is there. You would not go to anyone else's site on how to use Turnitin, because this has been specifically tailored towards the Trinity experience. Now, you may have concerns yourself about how best to paraphrase other people's writing or ideas, about copying and pasting, quoting other sources, and what counts as common knowledge. Common knowledge is an interesting one. We'll be talking about that. So it's completely expected that your work will include paraphrases of other people's words, of other people's ideas. That's part and parcel of the academic system. But the key thing here is you need to attribute those ideas, those paraphrases, to the people they originally came from. You can't just pass them up as your own ideas, as your own words. Okay, so it is important that you do this, and this does catch people out, because they think if I've put it into my own words, it's now mine. It isn't. It's the ideas which are important, not necessarily the words. Now, if your entire essay or your entire thesis is made up of just paraphrasing other people's ideas and parroting them back in a slightly different way, you will get marked down for that. But that doesn't mean it's anything to do with plagiarism. Now, if you think, well, okay, but I'm just going to mix stuff up a bit here, and I'm going to change some of that into my own words, and I'm going to do a bit of cut and pasting and just shift stuff around, it is actually very easy to detect that. Often because people leave bits of a sentence hanging and they don't do it all correctly, especially if you're working late at night on this. So even in that context, you still need to attribute your sources, even if you've mixed stuff up a bit. Now, quotes. This seems a bit more straightforward in many ways, because if you are quoting someone else's work, you have to put an attribution into it. You may know about block quotes, which is basically an entire paragraph which is used as a quote. You should be given a little bit of guidance on how to do that in your essay or your thesis or whatever. But again, just as we said there with doing long things, a paraphrase of other people's work, long block quotes will be marked down stylistically. Now, common knowledge. As said, this is actually surprisingly tricky. All subjects will have areas where people are expected to know particular facts. Okay, and we really are talking about facts here. Things like dates and events and information. For instance, like when Sir Isaac Newton discovered gravity. Gravity was obviously always with us there, but when he came about the idea of it and started writing that down, it would be common knowledge that the theory of gravity was attributed to Sir Isaac Newton. You don't perhaps need to do that, but there will be other things where in a professional field, you would be expected to know, for instance, when that was or whatever. So a physicist might know something as common knowledge, but a lay person would not. And it would be the same in all disciplines. But the easiest thing with this is if you are in any doubt, then find something which cites that information. So you're saying, well, I got this information from this particular source. Now, something that I'd like you to think about is, can you plagiarize yourself? Just have a think about that now. So this might come up, say, if you wrote an essay last year for a particular module and you now have a different module and you've been effectively asked the same question. Can you just reuse that essay? And if not, what do you do? Well, it is perfectly possible, as I said there, to plagiarize yourself. Self-plagiarism is very much a thing. And it would be massively frowned upon to just submit the same piece of work. Okay, what you should be doing is trying to come up with some different slant on that, and if necessary, you can reference your own work, even if it's not been published. So there is always a way all reference management systems will have a way that you can reference, say, unpublished work like letters or essays or emails or things along those lines. Where it gets a little bit more tricky is if you are reusing a piece of work and it's kind of seen as being the same work. What I mean by that is it is often the case in postgraduate work or even in some undergraduate work that you have to submit what's called a research proposal. And you then write the longer form of work based on that research proposal. Is the research proposal the same thing or a different thing? And some lecturers might say, well, okay, you had to upload that research proposal into Turnitin, and now you can't just reuse it as part of the longer form work as part of your thesis. But other lecturers may say, well, no, of course they're the same thing. Like the whole point of the research proposal was to get you prepared for writing a longer thing. So of course you can completely use that. So it's not quite a straightforward question here, and it's not necessarily a straightforward answer. And in some ways, you would want to talk to your lecturer, your supervisor, to tease out what they thought on this topic. Now, here we have another excellent resource, which gives you a quiz where you can test your knowledge of plagiarism. So this is from our colleagues at Cornell University. So again, the link is there. Work your way through it. So let's now move on to referencing. So referencing and citation, the two are pretty much interchangeable, is the flip side of plagiarism. So to avoid plagiarism, you need to reference your sources. So Newton has this fantastic quote, and I cannot pass off this quote as myself, although I believe other people did occasionally use much the same terminology before Newton. So I'm using that quote from Newton. I need to say it's not my words, it's Newton's words. Okay, and how I do that in particular referencing styles, I would need to learn. Okay, and it's completely taken that you will need to use other people's ideas and other people's words in any type of academic work. Okay, you are not going to be coming up with these ideas without using the work of people that come before you. But the quid pro quo here is that you credit those sources with having come up with these ideas. Okay, and then people can go to these original sources and see, have you represented those ideas correctly? And you're not trying to claim them as your own. So there are many different citation styles. There are actually thousands of different citation styles. Thankfully, there are not thousands in use at Trinity, but there are certainly quite a number. And it's up to your course director or your supervisor or the handbook for your course to tell you which citation style you should use. Now, think about what you've been told. Have you been told to use any of these citation styles, or have you indeed been told to use whichever one you want? You need to know that before you start writing anything. And it really is important to either get to grips with whichever citation style you've been told to use, or to pick one and to stick with it and to learn the rules and regulations of using that style. So citation styles, referencing styles, these tell you how to present the information on any particular source. And there will be different instructions on how to use grammar, like what's italicized, what's in bold, where the full stops and commas go. And these rules will be written down somewhere. So we'll be showing you a bit about that now, about different brands of referencing styles. There are 3 broad types we'll be going into in a second. But you really do need to find out what the rules are. You can't just make up a referencing style on the fly. As said, there are thousands of referencing styles, of citation styles, but the vast majority of them fall into 3 broad groups, and that is parenthetical or inline styles, numbered styles, and footnote styles. So let's take a look at those now. So parenthetical styles use a brief summary of the reference in the text, and these are normally author and date, but not necessarily. There are other types of these bracketed styles which use author and title or author and page, and then at the end of your work you will find the full reference, which would enable someone to actually get to that. Okay, so that full list at the end is called a reference list or a bibliography. There are technical differences between those 2 terms, but most people use them interchangeably. And then they are normally in alphabetical order by the surname of the first author. So these are sometimes called Harvard styles because the first place to actually come up with this style of referencing was Harvard in the 1880s. And they're called parenthetical styles because they use brackets, parentheses. They're also sometimes called inline styles because this information is put into the main body of the text, so it's in line with the text. Okay, so as I said, most of them are author and date, but there are other variants of that. But so they are sometimes called author date styles. So parenthetical or inline or Harvard or author date are all broadly interchangeable. Okay, so we have an example here of the sort of information you would need to know to be able to reference something. So you need to know what type of thing it is. Is it a journal article? Is it a book chapter? Is it a YouTube video? You need to know who the authors are. You need to have the year that it was published, the title of it, and what it was published in. So some things will have a secondary piece of information of where it was published. So for instance, a chapter in a book, you would need to know the title of the chapter and the title of the book. A journal article, you need to know the title of the article and the title of the journal. And then other information which goes on to give you more details about that publication. So for instance, here we have the volume and issue and page numbers and something called a DOI, which is like an address of it online, which doesn't change. So let's look at that in a very well-known Harvard type style called the APA. So this is now on its 7th edition. And again, I'm not going to go through all of the details here, but you can see how it's put the main detail you need to find that reference, so the author and date in the text in brackets, and then there's more information at the end in the reference list, which will enable you to actually find that particular article. So let's move on to numbered styles. So these list the references in the order they are mentioned using a digit, so a number in the text, which then links you to the fuller citation at the end. So this is different from the author date styles, which use the author and date in the text. This uses a number, and the ordering of them is completely different when it comes to the end. So they're in the order they are mentioned, not in alphabetical order. So a really common variant of this is called Vancouver. So there is actual rules that go with this Vancouver style. But then all number styles are sometimes referred to as Vancouver styles. And there's a couple of the other variants of these numbered styles. So the IEEE and JAMA and the Lancet all use these numbered styles. It's actually very, very common in, say, medical literature. So in the text, you would, the first time something is mentioned, it would use that number, and these numbers would go up, and then it would be listed in that order at the reference list in the end. So the important thing to realize here is that if you use that reference again later on in your text, it would use the same number as the first time. Now, footnoting styles. So footnoting styles they look a bit like number styles, but they are actually really, really different. These footnoting styles, they use the footnote system, which you would put in a footnote using your Word or your other word processing software, and then those footnotes would appear at the bottom of the page, and then you would insert the reference into that footnote. So those footnotes might be ordered so that they start again at the start of every chapter, or they might carry on all through your work. So if you're writing a book, they might start again at the start of each chapter, or they might not. Okay, so probably the best known of these footnoting styles is what's called the Chicago style. You'll notice these things are often named after the city or the university where they were invented. So its notes and bibliography style is its footnoting style. And another one which is used by the School of History in Trinity is the Irish Historical Studies style. So those are both types of footnoting styles. So again, you can see how this would look in a real world example. So they tend to put in this footnote, and then at the bottom of the page, you would have a version of what that would look like using more information. And then it is generally the case they are mentioned again in a slightly different way of doing it in that reference list at the end of the work. So how do you get to grips with these things? Well, you may well be given access to a particular style guide, as they tend to be called, which lists all of the ways of doing this. We really like this online guide. It really does bring together a lot of the stuff that you need to know. It's very, very good on the APA style. So I often go to this if I want to use one of the weird and wonderful things to do with APA. That's a brief introduction to these different types of styles, but how do you then use your sources within your own work using these styles? So for instance, you found a really good quote and you want to use that, or you found the best article you could possibly find, which really explains the point you're trying to make. You need to keep a really tight rein on those references. You need to write them down somewhere. You need to keep records on where that quote came from. Otherwise, in 3 months' time or in 3 years' time, when you're trying to find the source of that, you're going to be absolutely stumped. So there are different ways of doing this. I mean, some people would just paste the reference into a Word document. Some people, if they're doing lots of searches within databases, use the inbuilt saving functionality of those databases to save things. Okay, and even our library catalog will enable you to email a list of results to yourself. But we think by far the easiest way to get to grips with this is to use software. Okay, so there are lots of different tools which enable you to put references together in one place and then to actually put them into your written work. So you may have heard of some of these things. You may have used some of them. Have you used any of them or not? So some of the most common ones are Zotero, Mendeley, and EndNote, and we'll be talking about that in a second. Word also has an inbuilt referencing helper application, but it is actually very limited and only has a very small amount of inbuilt styles, where things like Zotero or EndNote and Mendeley will give you access to thousands of different styles. And it's highly likely it will give you access to the ones which you need to use for your essay or for your thesis. Now, here in Trinity, we use EndNote. So we do lots of training to do with EndNote, the app. EndNote Online is also it's an entirely online based one, which is actually reasonably good if you are just doing a couple of essays, or if you just have to do one written project. Then EndNote Online is probably fine for you. If you're doing anything beyond that, if you have to do a systematic review, or if you're writing a thesis, then we really do recommend getting to grips with EndNote Desktop. And we run training sessions on how to use that as part of our library hit sessions. And we also put up videos on how to and give you access to the resources to best use them. If, however, you're already using something like Zotero or Mendeley, to be honest, you're probably better off sticking with it rather than just moving to something else because the one we support. You're probably better off using the one that you know best. Okay, so where to get extra help with this? Well, folks, if you want to get to grips with plagiarism and how to avoid it, then the best place to go is our dedicated Avoiding Plagiarism website. So we gave you a link to that. It's on the library homepage, and just avoiding plagiarism. Or you can always talk to your subject librarian. So at the very start of this, I said that I am what's called a subject librarian here in Trinity. So every subject has someone associated with that subject, with that topic. We've also given you some links to some helpful videos in this, and to that really good one from the University of Connecticut, which just really straightforwardly explains what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. If you have general questions about the referencing style you've been told to use, then again, talk to us or use those online resources that we're giving you access to. If it comes to Turnitin, you're best off talking to your supervisor or your course director or someone from your department first. We really cannot give you much help with that, but our colleagues elsewhere in college are very much on the ball because they're the people that actually look after Turnitin behind the scenes. As to which referencing style to use, if you haven't been given any information on that, again, just talk to your supervisor in the first instance. And if they say use any, then well, maybe just use the APA 7th edition. Now, when it comes to reference management software, to things like EndNote, well, specifically for EndNote, talk to us. Talk to your subject librarian, first of all. They may well then pass on your call to someone else, your query to someone else, but that would be your first port of call. EndNote is looked after by the library rather than IT services. And then finally, if you have questions on academic writing in general, then our colleagues at Student Learning Development really are the people to talk to. They have lots of resources to get you to grips with note-taking and writing essays and all of that kind of nuts and bolt business of being part of an academic family. Okay, so I hope you found that in some way useful. I'd just like to wish you the best of luck and thank you for your attention. Thank you and goodbye.